You're listening to Idea Collider, a show that explores the world of asymmetric learning. On this show, I will sit down with pharmaceutical experts and business leaders to discuss how to embrace uncertainty and the different learning style that follows. I'm your host, Mike Rea. Let's get into the show. So welcome to Idea Collider, the podcast about asymmetric learning and the effect that has on organizations. And I'm delighted to be welcomed by John Waid, the CEO of C3, to discuss learning, asymmetric learning, and its impact on culture and the impact of culture on learning. So John, great if you could introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us your journey to where you are today and really what your primary focus is.
Okay, so I started on this journey by working for Fortune 500 companies. I worked for Nestle, for PepsiCo, for U.S. Tobacco, which owned Chateau Saint Michel. So I was the marketing director for cigars and wines for them. Rose in the ranks from sales rep at a pharmaceutical company at what used to be called Warner Lambert, and was bought by. Who's the person that was bought? It was bought by not Merck, but the other big one, Pfizer.
Pfizer. Yeah.
So I worked my way up from sales rep all the way to general manager, and worked in that career from when I was about 21, even though I'd had jobs since I was 10 years old. Worked my way up until I was 40, then got into the learning and training business. I was hired by a company, a European company, a Swiss-German company, and they said, "You're a natural at this." So I've been doing leadership training, and then about 10 years ago, I got into the culture space. I actually was able to register corporatecultureconsulting.com, which was unusual to get that domain because I was looking at strategy, and you couldn't get anything with the word strategy in it. And structure and all that was also taken. So the culture space was wide open. And there's only a few people in the world that have been at it passionately for as long as I have. So I really treasure that. I call myself the culture man.
Interesting. Well, I'm gonna chase you down that rabbit hole if you don't mind. So
absolutely.
Because clearly in this discussion of company culture, and you used the idea of learning as a sort of feed into culture. Do you have a definition that you use when you talk about culture?
So culture should be able to be explained in less than a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask leaders to explain it, it's an hour, and they still haven't gotten to the meat of the matter. So for me, culture is real simple. It's what is your purpose? What is your mission? What are your values? And I say you only have 3. And what are the principles of behavior? And I keep those to 3.
Interesting. And so why do people take an hour to do something that theoretically they know you should be able to do all of those things by the time they get there?
So it's the difference between know-how and show-how.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us know what culture is, or at least have an idea of what it is. It's the actual doing of the culture that becomes so difficult. I attended a culture conference at the Plaza Hotel earlier this year in New York with about 500 people, and I thought it was a NASA spaceship they were building. The problem is the knowledge is there. It's not simplified, though. It's not. We have a KISS philosophy: keep it short and simple. Because really the brilliant ideas are the ones that are simplified that can be executed. There was a famous general here in the United States, Colin Powell. He ran the military on index cards. And somebody asked him, a reporter asked him one day, "Why do you run the military, or what are those index cards?" He had them with a rubber band. He said, "This is how I run the military. Because if it doesn't fit on this card, it's too complicated. If it's too complicated, it won't get executed. If it doesn't get executed, then why are we here?" And I feel like for the pharmaceutical industry, biotech, and medical device, which I specialize in, I do a lot of work in those industries. I feel like we overcomplicate things. And obviously, when you're developing drugs and things, it is very complicated. I bet you that the really good drugs are the ones that simplify, that get it right.
Yeah. Well, Colin Powell's an interesting case study in lots of ways, right? I mean, his effect on his views on decision making and how much of the information you needed before you can make a decision, and whether there's too much information with which to make a decision, which meant that you're taking too much time to get there. That is a really interesting insight into the kind of thing we're talking about here. What do you need to know before you go ahead?
Yeah, paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah. So, do you think? So let's look at purpose as the first thing, because you think that most pharmaceutical companies would have nailed the purpose, but I mean, my experience is they write an easy tagline quickly and then never really define the purpose of their organization. Have you got any examples or kind of case?
So I've worked with several companies from large to small ones in this industry, and what the big faux pas that people commit is that the purpose is too long. Mm-hmm. So nobody knows what it is. It's usually sometimes written in paragraph format. We took a paragraph for a medical device company that was in the infection space, and it was a paragraph long. And even though they showed it at every single meeting, if you were to ask anyone in the meeting what it was, nobody could tell you verbatim what it was. Yeah. So we simplified it to: we save lives by preventing infections. Done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Done. So everybody in the company started to know that we save lives by preventing infections. That's a noble purpose. Mm. That's the reason to exist. That's your why. Yeah. So the purpose should be the why. It should be short. The less words, the better. Because guess what? If it's too long, too complicated, it won't get executed. It won't get even memorized.
Interesting. Do you have, maybe anonymized sort of examples, case studies for things you've seen or that are great or bad?
Yeah. So most companies, and the larger they get, the worse it gets, because they don't have this very well defined, because less than 10% of the people in the companies even know what the values are. Most of the time there's 7 of them. I don't know why. Lots of companies like the number 7. Some consultants sold 7. The thing about it is 7 is too hard to remember, and then they tend to be very generic, the values. So you've got a long purpose statement, a long mission statement, you've got a lot of generic values, and then you don't really have principles of behavior tied to them, or if you do, they're also written in paragraph format. So, and they're not trained, they're not lived. And so you wonder why there's chaos in companies, and why, if you were to ask one person what the culture was, the second person would tell you something completely different, and the third person would tell you something completely different. So my challenge to companies and to people listening to this podcast today is, can you explain your culture in less than a minute? We save lives by preventing infections. We are the leader in the infection prevention space. That would be the purpose and the mission. And then what are your values? And this we did with a group in the UK for this particular company. They came up with hand on heart was one of the values. I didn't even know what hand on heart meant in the British, in the British sense of it. Yeah. And then the second one was really cool: a spirit of learning and education. So a spirit of learning and education. So the first one, hand on heart, is what I call the aspirational value. The second one is I call the growth value, and that is the spirit of learning and education. So always getting better, always improving, growth value. The last value is your operational value. This is your survival value. So for them, it was to the ends of the earth. No, to infinity and beyond. I'm sorry, to infinity and beyond. I thought that was awesome. So by doing that, first of all, they're unique. Hand on heart is not everybody has that as a value. A spirit of learning and education, you'd be hard to find that. And then it was to the ends of the earth, because I remember one of the guys said he was going to send me some biscuits, and he obviously didn't go to the ends of the earth to get them to me, because I haven't received them yet.
Yeah. So I'm going to follow you down that rabbit hole as well, because that's one of the challenges I see with a lot of the stuff that gets written on websites is that it's easy to write down, but it's hard to live.
Right.
And I think we know the kind of Zappos and other examples, right, where the lived culture is tangible.
Right.
But I think as soon as it's not, or as soon as it's not, mirrored from top to bottom,
Right.
does it risk becoming kind of just words on a website?
It is words on a website. It's actually not even known words on a website. So the knowing part doesn't exist.
Right.
So the doing part doesn't exist. That's
Mm-hmm.
the problem. If I were to go into most companies and say, "What's your purpose?" Blank stares. And I go into lots of companies. "What's your mission?" Blank stares. "What are your values?" Blank stares. "What are the principles of behavior?" Blank stares. So if you don't know what they are, how could you possibly be doing it?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is an issue with most companies. And there's some good companies out there. Roche has 3 values. They're somewhat generic, but at least they only have 3, and they're relatively balanced. So I would say that Roche is a little further ahead of most because they have the 3 values. Now, their 3 values are integrity, courage, and passion. So passion would be your aspirational value, courage would be your growth value, and integrity would be your operational or survival value, because without integrity, it's hard to survive, especially in an industry that's built on integrity, because you're talking about people's health. So they're really good values. They're somewhat generic. These could be made a little bit less generic by saying integrity spirit, courageous heart, and passionate soul.
Yeah.
That way you're tying the word to some kind of body part or some kind of and so Southwest Airlines in the US, if you were to ask almost any of their employees what their 3 values are, they could tell you what they are. One of them, the operational value, is warrior spirit. That's how they get the luggage on the planes and get the planes turned around. That's how they run a low-cost airlines. Their growth value is servant heart. If you think about servant heart, if you're arrogant, you're probably not going to learn. If you've got a servant heart, you're probably going to learn and get better. That's a growth value. And then their aspirational value is fun loving, spelled Luving, because they were founded in Love Field, which the initials for Love Field in Dallas are LUV. And at Southwest, they spell love LUV. As a matter of fact, when the pilots and the flight attendants get on, they put their hand on the heart to go to the previous hand on heart. Because without a heart, it's just a machine, is what they say. So Southwest Airlines, if you had bought $10,000 of their stock in the late 60s, sold it 30 years later, you'd have about $12 million.
Yeah.
The biggest increase, and it's written in Good to Great. Sorry about that. And Built to Last. Yeah.
Yeah. All built on being, because I remember reading about their purpose, right? This low cost airline thing, and should we start serving meals? And it's easy to answer in that situation. Does that make us a low cost airline? Again, no, we're not doing it. And that kind of real test as litmus test for does the thing that we're doing match our culture? And I guess that's the challenge of I typically do this opposite thing, right? So if someone writes integrity down, you go, well, would anyone expect you to write the opposite of integrity down on as one of the things on the website? And you go, well, if it would seem ridiculous to write the opposite of integrity, maybe writing integrity is too generic for you to go with. But so I'd be interested in, you use the word learning again, this kind of idea of large organizations or have divisions, they have structure, they have hierarchies. Do you find monolithic cultures there, or do you tend to find serial or linear or other kinds of organizational cultures?
So the culture part of it should be pretty fixed, right? You can actually take your purpose, your mission, your values, and your principles of behavior and apply them to any department, apply them to any job. The accounting department's going to live hand on heart a little bit different than the marketing department, which is different from the sales department. That's where the principles of behavior for each department come in. And those are defined by the departments. But the principles, the mission, the purpose, the mission, and the values should stay the same, and they should be consistent throughout time. And that's why the principle of 3 is so important. And the reason I came up with 3 is because I saw Southwest had it. Then I went to the U.S. and we have 3 values in the U.S: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Life is our aspirational or survival value, because without life, you don't have that. Liberty is how we grow and get better. So that's the growth value. And the pursuit of happiness is our aspirational value. That's why we get up in the morning, to pursue happiness. Because life is great, liberty's great. If you can't pursue happiness, then why are we here? So,
yeah, it's interesting, because one of the things that I see within pharma, right, is this presence of cultures rather than culture, which is right, and it's almost a linear culture, right? So, one of my huge beliefs is that if you're going to lean into learning as an organization, you have to be open to the voices of everyone in the organization, because you're developing a product that you want to get to patients and physicians, and you want to sell it. You want the sales reps to be able to, say something about it when it gets there. But there is this kind of culture of, the respect seems to flow downhill, right? So you've got this kind of, highest respect paid to the R&D guys, the medics, the PhDs. And then they still mostly see the sales guys as people that are going to take the bag at the end of the day and sell it. But of course, if you're going to have a learning culture, a learning organization, and especially an asymmetric learning organization, it's going to have to listen to what the market wants. It's going to have to put that back into product development. So I see cultures rather than culture within large pharma, at least. And maybe biotech is different, but I'd be interested in your experience.
Respectful spirit, right? Respect is key, right? If you don't respect people that work in different parts of the organization, the salespeople aren't respected by the product development people or the marketing, and you see a lot of clashes in companies where they don't respect each other. And if you don't respect, then you're not going to listen. If you don't listen, you're not going to learn. And then you also have to have an open mind. So respectful spirit might be a good value in almost any company, right? Because that's going to help you. A respectful spirit is going to help you to learn and grow. It could be a great growth value. So the problem is most companies are siloed. So the CEO comes up with an idea, and then it gets, thrown all the way down and then all the way up, and then it probably doesn't get executed. And CEOs wonder why things don't get executed. It's because we're not all on the same page, because we don't have the same culture. I would say that they're microcosms of culture, from your own personal values to the company supposed values, which nobody knows, to the values that everybody thinks the company should have. So there's, on a basic level, 3 levels: your personal values, your current culture, and the values that nobody knows, and then a future culture of the values that they'd like to have. And if companies could make that transition and then live this simple culture, and we write it in little booklets, literally a simple booklet that has not many pages, and they're in big type, and they're all pretty much the same. Our template is the same for almost any company, any industry, any company. Now, the values are going to be different. Obviously, your purpose is going to be different, and your mission is going to be different. So each one should have something that's customized to them. Because how do you strategy? If you define strategy as what is your unique and or sustainable competitive advantage, then if you have a unique culture, that already becomes a strategy. It's what is your unique and or sustainable culture, which is built on those unique values and purpose and mission, and the principles of behavior. So I had a person say to me the other day, "This seems like it's impossible. It's like climate change. It's like impossible to execute this." And I said, "No, it's not." I said, "You could start executing it today if you make it simple." and you start to work on it and the behavior of, because not only if you know what your value, if you know your purpose, your mission, and your values and principles of behavior, guess what? You can hire for it. Mm-hmm. You can promote for it. You can fire for it.
Yeah.
So it makes it so that, and the really great companies, the Southwest Airlines out there, the Chick-fil-A's here in the US, the Zappos, although Zappos had 12 values, I'm not sure how you remember all those. Tony Hsieh in Delivering Happiness really said culture is what kept me in one business and had me exit. You know, when Microsoft bought my business, I exited the business because of the culture, and I gave up millions of dollars to do that. So culture matters, and because it's not well known or well defined, because it's not simplified, and because most importantly it's not lived, there's a huge opportunity in the pharmaceutical industry for companies that are ripe for this. If you're listening to this website or this this podcast, take action. Call me. Call Mike. Because Mike's exposed to lots of these asymmetric ideas. Because guess what? My idea took years to get. The Roman Empire had 3 values: utility, strength, and beauty. And probably the Americans took it out of the Roman Empire, right? Why reinvent the wheel, as they say?
Yeah. So how do you, if you were because one of the challenges with learning as you know, and I've heard organizations talk about themselves as learning organizations, and then you ask the next question, which is, well, who knows stuff in your organization and who is vulnerable, right? Who's vulnerable to learning stuff, and where does the learning take place? And it's interesting how narrowly they'll often define learning when they get to it, because, you know, people get promoted for being smart, they get promoted for being confident, they make decisions that they have to execute confidently. And almost this idea of learning is a vulnerable position. It's a statement of, look, we're going to set out to find out. When we don't have to, like the Colin Powell example we said, was a lot of military execution is about knowing that you don't know and then planning to find out when you get there, which is a skill, right? So that vulnerability doesn't often get mirrored in the pharmaceutical industry, where this kind of, this confident knowledge is predominant.
It's if you think about, I mean, I'm going to take it one more step. The values that you have, your aspirational value is the leadership value. That is the people skills value. That is the emotional and social intelligence value. We tend to promote people for their knowledge because they're smart and because they know a certain skill set, accounting or lawyers or whatever it is. And then we wonder why they fail is because they don't have that leadership or aspirational value of that humbleness that comes from having people skills. So I argue that there's very few leaders at the senior levels that, number one, know that soft skills are their number one priority, know that people and their employees are their number one priority. Because if you were to ask a CEO, what's your priority? They'll tell you, investors, shareholders, money, right? I often say money first, customers second, employees third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Most leaders that we promote because of their intelligence and because of their skill sets do not have that chip. And if they have it, it hasn't been developed enough to really be a great leader. Because to be a really great leader, you have to have that emotional part really well developed and care about your employees. The coaching part should help you to grow. So that's your growth value as the coach, right? That's also your structure value, what I call the structure value. And then your bottom line value, which you have to have too, that's your strategy level. The operational value is your strategy level. That's the manager. We tend to promote managers into leadership positions and wonder why they fail. So we need to rethink also who we're promoting to these senior levels and really take a close look at whether they're just managers or they also have the coaching chip in them, or the leadership, because the best ones have all three. Now, and they use it in different ways. Like the leader should be 60% leadership, 20% coaching, 20% managing, because you have to have all three to have a good functioning. That's why life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That's why there's three, and they cover different things. Does that make sense? I mean,
I know it's interesting because I think, two things happen, right? One is that you do get promoted into a position that may be a long way from your discipline, right? So you're now being asked about the design of the new campus, or you're being asked about the kind of the organizational structure, and this may be the first time you've ever thought about that. So whereas you might have been great when you get to inflammatory diseases, you might love that stuff, but and then the other is this, I think the consequence of that, which is it's really easy to say no in most organizations, right? Really hard to say yes. So you ask people the question of like, how many no's does it take to kill a product development? Say one. Yeah, one from anywhere will kill it. Typically, like someone will say no, that won't work, or say how many yeses will it take to keep it alive until it gets there? And it'll probably take about 1,000 yeses to get there. And so, well, given that you incentivize no over yes, and you've already got that ratio, so problem. How do you think about that when it comes to sort of culture and risk taking and courage and stuff? How do you encourage that?
So understanding that if I have a good experience at a restaurant, I'm going to tell one person. And if I have a bad experience, I'm going to tell 10. We are pre-programmed as humans to be negative. So the no comes out much easier. It's much more difficult to be positive and to be a yes person. So we got to train it. We got to hire for it. We got to promote it. We got to have it in our value systems. We have to have it in our purpose. We have to have it in our mission. Because if we don't, we're not going to get there. And lots of times people are hired for skill sets and not for the values that they bring, and whether they're going to follow the purpose, and whether they've bought into the mission. So we're hiring the wrong people. One of the very successful companies here in the U.S., it's a chicken franchise called Chick-fil-A. They're closed on Sundays. Everyone knows their values, and they have a wonderful purpose that's on a big rock at their headquarters here in Atlanta, where I used to live. And what's interesting about them is they sell $7.2 million per store per year. In 2021, Kentucky Fried Chicken, their biggest competitor, sold 1.5, and they're open 7 days a week. Now, the employees at Chick-fil-A are different from the employees at Kentucky Fried Chicken. You can predict the behavior because of the value systems, the purpose, and the mission, well-defined. They hire for that. So I can be assured that when I go into a Chick-fil-A restaurant, they're going to smile with teeth. They're going to greet me. They're going to ask me about myself. Not everyone, and for the most part, they will. And after I say thank you, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids are going to say, "It's my pleasure." It's guaranteed. So the experience at McDonald's or KFC is much different from the experience that you get inside a Chick-fil-A. And 4 times, 5 times, 6 times more revenue. So culture equals revenue. So anybody that's not investing in their culture, not investing in simplifying, and not investing in values, purpose, mission, and really training against it, hiring for, et cetera, is leaving money on the table.
Yeah. Do you find that, well, let's say you got 50 people, it's easy to hire for folks that can get along with each other. If you've got 30,000, can you kind of, at both ends of the spectrum, can you do the same thing?
Yes, you can. They have hundreds of thousands of kids that work for them. And what are they hiring for? Smiles. People that are courteous and kind, right? People that want to serve others. Yeah. That's why they say it's my pleasure, because it's my pleasure to serve you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you got to be diligent to do that because you got to go out and find them. Now, what they used to do is, and they still do it, is they would go to churches and they would ask the priest, or the rabbi, what are your best kids? We'd like to hire them. So you've got to have human resources departments are getting scaled down right now. If you really want to be in the human resources, you got to scale that up. Yeah. Because you need to go out and look for the ones that believe what you believe, because they're more likely to do what you're going to ask them to do anyway. That's Chick-fil-A's. We hire people that believe what we believe because they're more likely to do what we're going to ask them to do anyway. That was a critical statement as I visited their headquarters that stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Let me share a bad culture with you, because this happened recently. I heard a person at a company say, "We are a culture. We're a culture of complacency where people get promoted for doing nothing." Now, if I were the CEO of that company, I'd be really, really angry that is what people were saying about my culture. And that's why this company is slow, siloed, not progressive, not doing what they need to do to be the best. And they're going to get eaten by their competitors that are investing in culture and investing in a good purpose and mission and values. They're going to get eaten just like KFC gets eaten by Chick-fil-A every day, because there's lines wrapped around Chick-fil-A. They cause traffic jams here in the US. We often get caught in the traffic jams at the Chick-fil-A. The KFC has 2 cars in the parking lot.
How do you, someone says that to you, someone says that our culture is one of complacency and so forth. I suspect that's not what's written on the website. No. That's
not what's written on the website. Now, What's funny is that same company, if you were to ask any executive at that company, what do you stand for? They might be able to tell you one of the things they stand for, but they couldn't tell you them all. Yeah. And quite frankly, they're not living them. They're living actually the opposite. And again, these cultures are not what you think they are. They're what your people think they are and how they're acting, right?
I was it was a couple of years ago. I remember actually a client of mine who I gave an idea to from another connection. So, just an idea I passed on, and her response was actually, "Great, I'm going to hand this to the team, and you're going to know because of your connection outside what happens, but I'm going to use this as a culture test." Because these people do want to know, like this idea that you just gave me, and I don't want them to do it because I said. I want them to do it because they see this as a great idea. And I checked back a couple of months later, and she said, "Have you, has anything happened?" I said, "No." So she said, "This is really interesting." So this was a kind of live culture test for, people that should be driven by as much purpose as you can get in our industry, and an idea that was new, to do something that they'd had a problem with for a while, which is why she recognized it. And I thought it was interesting that she would want to do that culture test. And I think, to your point, it feels like the kind of thing you'd do a lot if you're able to.
Yeah. Less than 1% of companies have that globally right now. And I'd say less than 0.5%. But they're the ones outperforming all the peers in the industry. And people are dumbfounded at why one company outperforms, like we talked about earlier, why one company outperforms the other. Because guess what? They do it better. They do the culture part better. They do the processes better. They do the strategies better. But there's a reason why they say culture eats strategy for breakfast, even though there's people that say that's not a true statement, which I agree, because strategy is important, culture is important. The thing about it is, the reason they say culture eats strategy for breakfast is because if your culture doesn't want to do it, if the value systems aren't aligned, the purpose isn't aligned, the mission isn't aligned to do it, no matter what strategy you propose, they're not going to do it.
So as you straddle industries, I'd be interested in, there's a conversation I had a few years ago, which was really interesting. And it was, so tech versus pharmaceuticals, right? And I was chatting to this guy, and I was chasing him through some questions, and the question was, is it a innovation culture? Is it an agile culture here? And he said, yeah, I'm actually here because I came up with an idea and I got funded and we created a new group. And I said, oh, next question. So how long did that take? He said, oh, it was 2 weeks. So what do you mean 2 weeks? He said, well, 2 weeks from giving the idea to my manager and getting started. I said, okay. I said, was there a budget? He said, yeah, I got a budget of $20 million. I said, okay. And how many yeses did it take? He said, 2. It took my manager and the CEO of this, large tech company. I said, that's incredible. And, describe that to people in pharmaceuticals. They're like, no way. Like, that you wouldn't get 2 yeses because the 5 or 6 to get to the CEO and back. And it wouldn't be 2 weeks. It might be 6 months. It might be a year. And when I was following up with this guy, he said, look, this is because the CEO's view is that he's pre-approved ideas that are going to come to him. It's not worth his time to evaluate them on their own merits. He doesn't believe that he can spot a winner or pick a winner because you can't. Actually, you've got to get developing. It'd be a waste of time to wait 6 months to hear the idea. So he'd rather put $20 million down for a good idea that his manager support. And of course, that supports his manager, and this guy is now energized. You mentioned that to people in pharma, they cannot get their heads around that because the culture is really this one of feeding up the pyramid and back down and right instead of being interesting. So do you see industries behave differently, and are there kind of more positive environments in some than others?
Yeah, so the structural component is important because it, again, ties with the culture, should tie with the culture. So if you have a culture that has the values and everything defined, they're going to run more of a meritocracy. The meritocracy is, if you add merit, if your idea is good, you belong here. We're going to support you. If you don't add merit, you're not working real hard, or you're not in line with our value systems, and you're not. We're going to have to move on you. A fancy way for what. So it's important that as companies look at their structures, that they're aligned with the culture and also aligned with the strategies, because that's going to impact. If you've got a pyramid structure and you want innovation, guess what? By the time it goes from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top, the meritocracy or the flatter organization is going to beat you every day. The one that got 20 million CEO, yes from CEO, yes from manager, we've started. That's going to beat the 2 or 3 years it's going to take for the drug to go up and down the food chain. COVID has caused a few companies, many companies, to really speed up the timelines. Even the FDA here in the US had to speed up its timeline. We need to start creating organizations where we don't have to wait 10 years for that groundbreaking idea to get through. We need to create yes and, what we call yes and organizations versus yes but. If you're hearing yes but in every meeting, what are they saying? No. A yes but is a no.
That leads to another question I was going to ask you, is really around the impact of COVID and Zoom and remote working and so on in cultures. Is it, especially in a knowledge industry like pharmaceuticals, where it's, most people aren't hands-on. Can you build culture successfully this way, or do people have to be together?
You can build it this way, together, etc. You can build it right now. Because again, the building blocks are simple. What is your purpose? What's your mission? What are your 3 values? What are the principles of behavior? Whether you do that virtually and practice it virtually, or you do it in person and practice it in person, doesn't really matter. Again, it doesn't exist right now. And so for asymmetric learning, for people listening that are interested in this, it's simple to get this started. It's basically brainstorming what are your personal values of your people, and we have assessments that measure that. What are the current values, and what are the future values that your people want? May I share something with you? Or
please, yeah.
Okay. I just want to share with you a simpler culture book, and this is a rough draft. This is for a company that we're just starting to talk to them about doing work for them. So if you look at here, this is a very simple culture book, Our Guide to Excellence, the Labori Way. This is a medical device company. Strong core values and a little statement about the importance of values, a table of contents, purpose, vision, values, and most important principles. So their aspirational values persist with passion. Their growth values work together, and our operational value own it. So persist with passion. If that's aspirational, I have passion. Growth is we work together, we learn from each other, we're open to learning. And our operational value is get it done, own it. So, so here you've got a simple purpose. We believe in preserving the dignity of life. That's it. Not a whole paragraph. We're the leading global developer, manufacturer, and marketer of innovative medical technology. Our values persist with passion. Our growth value work together and own it. Now, again, this is simple if you work on it together with them. That's what we specialize in as a company, is we'll help you to create these little booklets. Then our aspirational value persists with passion. Right now, we've got 3 actions. Our growth value work together. We've got too many here. We've got to narrow those down. And then our operational value is own it. So we've got a few actions there. These are principles of behavior. And that's their booklet.
Nice.
It's 5% knowing and 98% or 95% doing.
Yeah, which that's the bit I think people like working on the writing it down. Yeah. So I know I've only got a few minutes left with you, John. So I'd be interested, as you look forward 2022, 2023, what is it? You're attending those conferences, focused on culture. What should we be thinking about in terms of workplace culture going forwards?
First of all, get a definition of it. And for me, it's like I said, a purpose, a mission, 3 values, and 3 principles of behavior per value. Get some kind of definition that everybody knows. Then put that definition to work. Develop a small culture book if that's what you want to do. We recommend that because what gets written gets done. And if it's simple, it's more likely to get executed, like Colin Powell. And then really start to train, hire, fire for that culture. From the book Good to Great, the right people on the bus are the ones that are going to live our culture. Sitting in the right seats is the structure part, the meritocracy part. We put you in the right seat. And then a leader that has strategy is driving the bus, right, in the right direction. He's leading us with a unique and or sustainable competitive advantages. So if we could get more executives to buy into these simple ideas and more importantly, execute it, the pharmaceutical industry or any industry out there, if you're the company doing this, you're going to be a Southwest Airlines, a Chick-fil-A, a Zappos, as opposed to the competitors that are performing 5 times below you. So I don't know about you. I'd rather be the high performer than the low performer. And if you're in a low performing culture, do you even know it? And second, are you okay with that? Because being tremendously average is what most companies are today. And I hope that they'll be exceptional with things like this.
No, and as I think we were talking about before, this idea, same drug, 2 companies. It used to be 2 companies, now it's about 20, right? Any drug you've got, there are 20 different people doing the same thing. So you've got to be looking for sources of advantage, and clearly culture is going to have to be one if you're going to win that race amongst 20 horses. It's not going to be down to necessarily just the horse, but the rider and the stable and the training and so much more. The thing we've introduced is this something called this or that. So one question to throw you, which is, in a team environment, would you prefer disruption or innovation?
Disruption. Disruption, because disruption causes innovation if the culture will support it. Yeah. And it's a much quicker way to go. Now, we don't have disruption in companies very much because we have people that don't want to hear the truth. The truth will set you free. First, it's going to get you angry. So I'd rather have disruptors. And the companies that are into disruption are by the very nature into innovation. But you have to be very mature and have good value systems around that. Because if you have an ego, guess what? You got to check it at the door if you're going to be in this disruptive organization. You got to check your ego at the door. And we've got way too many egos going in companies. And quite frankly, the purpose for our company is to make the world better for employees. If we had better leaders that were disruptive and listened to the truth and took action on it, we'd have better and happier employees. Because at the end of the day, if you want a better bottom line, be good to your front line and have a good culture.
It's interesting. No, thank you. It reminds me, you're saying that one of my favorite books, Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, talking about Pixar and the plus things where, you might have worked on something for a week and you might have created 20 seconds of animation, but you had to bring it and it had to be seen by everybody and you had to be open to being criticized. Didn't matter who you were, didn't matter if you're the CEO, didn't matter, you were subject to the views of everyone in the organization. So that we say that, having a safe environment where that can happen is really, really important. So, John, thank you so much for being on this. In terms of interesting projects coming up for you, and also where can people find you?
They can find us at www.c3culture.com. And they can find me at John Waid, JOHNWAID.com. You can also look me up on LinkedIn. It's JOHN and then WAID. We'd love to work with you. I have a caveat to that, though. Be ready to do this because it's going to take work and because you have to be open for it. If you're just doing this to check a box, please don't call us. If you really believe in this and this is your why and you're passionate about these are the companies we want to work for. We want you to be great, not just good or average. So we want the people that are listening to this and that really want to be great to call us. Those that don't, call our competitors.
I love that. We had a session today just discussing some of our old case studies and say, what's the biggest predictor of a great outcome is a great client, and those great clients are the ones that want to be challenged. They're open to, to listening, to being vulnerable. And the clients that aren't so great, nothing ever really works right. So I think you're exactly right. They could have gone anywhere to get those outcomes. Yeah.
If you're a check the box, we're not your people. If you really want to make a difference, we can help. And we'd love to help, and we'll smile all the way. We'll smile with you all the way to the bank, and as long as the employees are happy, because that's my main driver.
Culture's got to be about you saying no sometimes as well, right? That's an important component.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. What a wonderful show you have, and what wonderful questions, and you really are a disruptor. So congratulations.
Let's do it together. So thank you, John.
All right.
Really joining us.
All right. Take care.
That's it for this week's episode of Idea Collider. To continue the conversation, visit our website at ideapharma.com. Follow us in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcast. Until next time, I'm Mike Rea, wishing you great success.